guys, Lawrence here from Tabletop Tactics, coming at you with a tournament Voxcast special. This time we are covering the SM Battle Report's No Retreat tournament, hosted just a couple of weekends ago. That was No Retreat 5, the 5th event that they've run in this format. The first of 8th edition in Warhammer 40,000, and it was a blast. Loads of applicants, and I think in the end we had 38 players that actually participated in the event. A couple of YouTubers were there. I got to meet Harry from the Dark Artisan. Geeks Wargaming were back, so it was great seeing them. Ace Face, and then a whole bunch of new faces that we've never seen at the previous events, which is always cool. You always get to meet new faces at every No Retreat, which is awesome. And I think this was the largest one they did. I think last No Retreat 4, I think, was 36 players. This time it was 38. I may be wrong about that, so forgive me if I'm wrong, but still 38 players, awesome turnouts. And when you're playing in Gibraltar of all places, so if you're not familiar with SM Battle Reports, go check them out on their website, smbattlereports.com. They do old school style written battle reports, very narrative focused battle reports with some great looking armies, really fantastic paintwork, and more importantly as well, on top of that, just to set the atmosphere, they've got amazing boards and amazing terrain, and really spend a lot of time sort of, you know, paying attention to that detail. And then when you go to the tournaments that they run, you're actually playing on the boards that you generally see them using in their battle reports. So it's it's like, you know, playing a battle report and filming it, because all of the boards are so beautifully done. You know, every single one of them in the event is incredible, and then being in Gibraltar on top of that, the atmosphere is fantastic, and it's kind of like a holiday, you know, a gamer's retreat if you like, hence the name No Retreat. So this was the 5th No Retreat I've been to. Lawrence Luck obviously prevailed in the first 3 events, where I managed to steal the title and take it back to the UK, which was awesome, really, really good fun. I did that with my Dark Elder, aka Drukhari, now in 8th edition. And then in the 4th No Retreat tournament, I took my Khorne, my World Eaters, which was awesome fun. I really, really love them. You'll see them again on the channel very, very soon. I'm actually just getting some new units added to them. Unfortunately, I won't be painting those this time, so I've got my buddies over at Siege to do it for me. I'm working on another project, but I digress. And rather appropriately, I thought I came 8th that time in No Retreat 4. 8th is the favourite of Khorne, so all was right in the world. And then we had No Retreat 5. So 2 weekends ago, and I decided, you know what, I won it the first few times with Dark Elder. Technically, I should give the Dark Elder, you know, another opportunity to see if they can steal the title back, right? Because I didn't take Dark Elder to No Retreat 4. So I packed up my Drukhari, and I know, you know, from having played with Drukhari since 8th edition dropped, that they've become a lot better than what they were before, actually. I always rated them pretty well anyway, but they did have some weaknesses. They weren't a top tier army, if you like. You know, so even when I went to the LVO, I had to mix in some Elder with them just to make them work. But overall, they were a good force. Now in 8th edition, they're an amazing standalone army. They're very strong. You can be very competitive with them. And funnily enough, the list I ended up taking to No Retreat 5 this couple of weekends back was almost identical to the first list I took with them in No Retreat 1. So I thought that was really quite interesting. It sort of came full circle, you know, which was cool. And I had a good feeling about it. I thought the army would do very well. And overall it did. So most of you by now already know the results of No Retreats. So I'm not going to tell you them quite yet, just in case you don't. So what I've done is, as I've done previously with these sorts of Voxcasts, I managed to film the beginning and the end of every single game, except the 4th game, where I only managed to capture the end of it because we were rushing to set up. But what I do need to say is that, obviously, bear in mind, guys, this is not the normal quality that I have. I wasn't in the studio environment. There is a lot of talking, there's a lot of noise. I've managed to filter out the voice as best I can so that you can hear what I'm saying. But you should get a really good gist of what was actually happening in the game, what I was facing. And then what I'm going to do is, after each game, is I'll stand here and I'll talk to you a little bit more about the tactics, because I've had a lot of requests about, especially from obviously Dark Elder fans, a lot of requests wanting to know, you know, why I took the list I did, what did I take, how did I beat some of the armies that I faced, because this time around with No Retreat 5, because it was a kind of like the first 8th edition tournament that SM Battle Reports had run in the No Retreat format, they didn't have any list building restrictions other than matched play from the rulebook. So it had to be 3 detachments, right? So other than that, there was no power level restriction like you'd normally get, you know, like in an ITC tournament circuit, etc. So it was pretty much no holds barred. So this time, as a result, we did see some hardcore lists, you know. And we had always seen some hardcore lists at No Retreat, but emphasis is usually on really nice, fluffy armies. You know, some of them were obviously very strong, but there was a nice variety, a nice mix. It wasn't like all hardcore competitive, right? But this time there were some big guns. So it was a really, really interesting event. My Drukhari, I was confident, would be able to stand up to most. So with no further ado, why don't we go over the actual video footage that I took. It's game 1 coming up next.
Folks, we're back. No Retreat 5. The forces of the Dark Elder deployed. Backlined against my first opponent, an old friend. We've actually played each other 4 times, in fact, in 4 previous No Retreats. Once in the finals of the first tournament, then the semi-finals of the second tournament, mid-table was the third tournament. So, sorry, it's just 3 times. But there we go. We're facing the Tzeentch Demons. Chema is a very good player, very competent. So this is going to be a tough matchup. I just lost the roll-off to go first, despite getting the +1. I did use a command point to seize. I would have preferred to go first against this, just because you get more firepower. And he, of course, is relatively short range. But we're looking at Fate Weaver here, a Brimstone, Horus fan, effectively, but with Exalted Flamers as well, because they are incredibly good. He does have a bit of a disadvantage because of the minuses to hit, but there you go, that's the way it is. Let me come back to you at the end of the game. Hello folks, we are back at the end of this game. Went to the wire, as it usually does with Chema. There's no one else here, apart from my opponent, of course, some judges. Everyone else is enjoying lunch. We've just finished. It was an awesome game. I actually did win. I don't think I deserved to win, in all honesty. It was a steal of the game. You can see here I'm holding this objective. Holding this objective because I've got 2 models. He's only got 3 models. 1 model within 3 inches. I won the Maelstrom. I won't bore you with all those points, but to cut a long story short, he's got 2 primary. I got 2 primary, so we drew. He got Warlord and he got Linebreaker for 2. I got Warlord and I got Linebreaker for 2. So that's a draw there. So we've drawn the primary, we've drawn the tertiary, but because I won the secondary, overall I win. I believe it's 18 points to 6. So it is a victory against one of the nastier armies in this tournament. So that's it's nice to have that out of the way. Now, why do I say I deserve to lose? Because I rolled like a dog. I rolled really, really poorly. So it was one of those games where you rolled so badly, you actually deserve to lose. But somehow I managed to win, of course, having last turn, because he did win the roll-off to go first. Having last turn actually saved me in the end, because I could go to those objectives. But really, really good game. Let's see what happens. Round 2 coming up next.
So guys, that was the result. 18 points to 6. A bitterly hard fight to the end there over those primary objectives. And ultimately, like I just said in the video breakdown, you know, I was lucky to seal it in the end. Funnily enough, not going first, because I ended up rolling so badly in the game anyway. It was actually a blessing I didn't go first, so that I could end up actually taking the objective, the primary objective at the end there, having the last turn. So it kind of worked out fine. Maelstrom, granted, and tertiary, granted, I got those, and I got them fairly comfortably early on. So I always knew that at a minimum, I was going to draw with him, because the way it works in the No Retreat format is if he won the primary, but I'd won the Maelstrom and the tertiary, it would be 14 tournament points apiece, so that's a dead draw. But as it stood, I was able to draw with him on the primary and win the Maelstrom and Tertiary. And so actually it ended up giving me quite a comfortable victory of 18 points to 6, which I was really pleased with. Now, what I think we should do now before going on to the second game is take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the tactics I used against this Cinch Demon army and against any army that has, you know, masses of smite and mortal wound output, you know, because it's effective. What I did was an effective tactic, and you'll see that throughout the tournament, throughout the games that I play, because right up to the final especially, there was a running theme with what I did with my warriors and how I could use them to combat these sorts of armies quite effectively. So first up, what was the list that I took? Okay, so the list was, as I've said, basically the same as what I took to No Retreat 1, which was really quite funny. So I ended up having an air superiority detachment of 3 Razorwing jet fighters with 2 Dark Lances, splinter cannons, and their Razorwing missiles. I then had a battalion with 3 Ravagers, all with Dark Lances. They're so good now. You know, if you're going to go really, really nasty, you could probably put a 4th Ravager in there, maybe even a 4th Razorwing as well. If you wanted to go amp it to really, really nasty, you know, generally at No Retreats, it promotes a little bit more of a balanced list building playing field. Granted, this time though, there were no restrictions, so I could have done that. But as it stood, that's what I had painted, and I thought, you know what, let's give it a spin. I know it's strong, I know what I'm doing with it, I'm very comfortable playing with Dark Elder. I'm sure that it will do fine. So had the 3 Ravagers there. Then for troops, I had 5 units of Kabbalite Warriors with a single blaster, and of course the Cyberite comes in there as well. Again, a little bit of a controversial choice now, and I'm not sure why either, because when I look at a lot of the forums, Dark City is an awesome Drukhari forum, Dark Elder forum, by the way, guys. I'm a big fan of it. I pop in and have a little look at it from time to time, not as much as I would like to, but from time to time I do. But on the forums in general now, it seems that there was this consensus that Venoms and, you know, smaller units of Kabbalite Warriors weren't that good. Now, having played Drukhari a fair amount in 8th, and I think knowing them quite well, it's been an army I've been playing for years now, I have to disagree with that statement, because they're incredibly good. You know, I think what happened was a lot of people went, oh, the Razorwing Flock spam's going to be our best bet to screen and to engage the opponent quickly. And yeah, look, it's effective. That's one effective build. However, that particular army does tend to suffer, in my opinion, in terms, especially since the nerf that they got as well. They actually got nerfed more than the Brimstone Horror Spam, in my opinion. But look, they're still good. The Razorwing Flocks are still good. That build can still be very, very effective. But then it tends to rely more on, you know, more Razorwing jet fighters or more Ravagers, and it becomes a bit mono build-ish. You know, still effective, but that's not the style I wanted to play with. Plus, I'm not entirely convinced it's the right way to go anyway with the Drukhari. So I went with my instincts. I went with this list, which again, I had this painted anyway, right? So I went for 5 units of 5 warriors. I gave them all dedicated transport Venoms. And again, that seems to be another controversial choice. You know, I've seen time and time again, oh, Venoms aren't any good anymore. You know, it's all about the Raider now, just have another Dark Light. Now, yeah, I can't disagree with that statement enough. You know, the thing with the Venom is, guys, all of the Dark Elder vehicles now have a 5+ invulnerable save, which, you know, is fantastic. It makes them deceptively powerful. No, they're not the toughest in the game. They don't have the most wounds in the game. But that 5+ invulnerable save, time and time again, you know, someone shoots a last cannon at you, you've got a 33% chance of saving, you get the 5 or 6, you've completely neutered their heavy weapon. Now, the difference between the Venom and the Raider is this. The Venom also comes with an inbuilt -1 to hit. Okay, so it's got the flicker field and it's got the night shield, giving a -1 to hit it against shooting attacks. Now, when you combine that with your Razorwings, which are also a -1 to hit, and you're generally mounting up in your vehicles, almost your entire army, bar the Ravagers, are a -1 to hit. Now, that might not seem like very much to you, but it comes in useful so often, and especially against new armies like the Guards, you know, which have an incredible amount of firepower. Actually reducing the Guard from 4 to hit you, now they're rerolling 1s if they're Cadian, which most of the time they probably will be, 4s to hit you, to a -1 to hit you, okay, all of a sudden hitting you on 5s, it makes a big difference. And the Venoms actually help your troops, those precious troops, those things that win you games by stealing objectives at the end of the game. They help you stay alive longer. And the Venom's firepower is still incredibly good because it's a 16-inch move gunboat, guys. It moves so fast, you know. So don't get me wrong, Raider spam can absolutely work, but overall, if you're going the Raider spam path, you're probably spending more points on your troops to fill those Raiders up, you know, and ultimately that's why you're still not seeing it that often, because people are going, I'd rather just spend points on Razorwing flocks, you know, and Ravagers, whereas the Venom spam army has an incredible amount of anti-infantry and anti-monster firepower, which again comes in useful time and time again. I know people are saying, oh, well, the range has been reduced, you know, it's only rapid fire 18 inches now to get you 12 shots. But when you're on a 16-inch move, Venom with a 5-up invuln save and a -1 to hit me, and you've got that repeated, because it becomes exponentially more powerful, right? If you've got the same thing repeated again and again. And I've got my Dark Light in there. I take the blaster on the warriors, and again people are saying, oh, why are you taking the blaster? You know, it's not point sufficient. You should have a Raider with a Dark Lance. No, I don't think so. I'd rather have my OBSEC. I'd rather have it spread across many baskets until we can start getting some stratagems which start benefiting the bigger units. For me, this is still the preferable way to run Drukhari, and it's still incredibly effective. And now I'll finish off this list and I can explain how it works in a little bit more detail and why it's especially effective, in fact, against psychic heavy armies and deep striking armies and so forth. So we've got those 5 units of troops. I've got 5 units of OBSEC in there, 5 additional blasters. So there's some more Dark Light for me already, which is extremely mobile on that 16-inch platform if they're within inside the Venom. So happy days. Then what we've got is a 6th Venom, which is a dedicated transport for my triad of Archons. So I've got 2 Archons and I've got a Slith. So both the Archons are armed with blasters. Happy days. More accurate Dark Light fire. And the Slith is there, quite frankly, because he was the exact amount of points to fit into the list, just to bring it up to 2,000 points. And he does and did help keep my Archon alive when he needed to, because he could intercept wounds that the Archon takes, taking them himself, which is a nice, cool bonus. Now, are the Archons competitive? Ultimately, no. That's one thing where the Drukhari, in my opinion, in the index, the Archon really is a bit of a miss. He's a miss, guys. You know, he doesn't, unlike any of the other armies, you know, in most of the index armies anyway, and now the Codex armies subsequently, the Dark Elder HQs, bar the Homunculus, are pretty lackluster. You know, I don't think that the rules were gotten particularly right with them. You know, the Archon gives a leadership buff on an army which ultimately, you know, doesn't need it that much. You know, he would have been far better off, you know, having a Path of Command style ability like an Elder Autarch, where he gave reroll 1s, or at least some sort of maybe a leadership debuff to your opponent. Or that's probably more realistic for a Homunculus, but you know, something which was a little bit more fluffy, because the Archons are supposed to be the overlords of Comorra. These are supposed to be incredible warriors. They're supposed to be incredible tacticians, very smart. They have to be alive in Comorra to get to where they are. And I don't feel that that's represented on the table. They're not particularly incredible in combat. They're not bad. Don't get me wrong. They're not bad. And the 2+ invulnerable save is okay. But if you compare the character to other HQs from other armies, he doesn't really cut it. However, the Fluff Bunny and me wanted to bring the Spider, so I bought him, you know, so I brought the Spider out, and it is still accurate blaster fire. So they are useful in that respect, and I did get some use out of them. But ultimately, yeah, they didn't generally make their points back, if I'm honest. So that is what I had nonetheless. Now, if you're going to do Homunculus and then sort of start buffing your Venoms up and your Homunculus Covens, absolutely, that's a fantastic list. I actually think that there's a lot of competitive legs to that style list, but that's not what I bought, so I'm not going to talk about that now because it's not relevant to this particular Voxcast. So this is more of a Cabal style tournament list, if you like. So what we had is, once we had those triad of HQs there, I had them in the 6th Venom. And that was the list. It was a very simple list design. It was quite nice because it had the lots of troops, had some flyers, had some heavy supports, had some decent, half decent HQs. Well, not that decent, but you know what I mean. So it had a little bit of variety, and it had a lot of firepower, and it was very fast, and it was deceptively hard to kill with the -1 to hit me and the 5+ invulnerable save on those vehicles. So it was a good solid thing to take to this sort of format event. Now, against Chema, what I had to do is his Exalted Flamers, which were incredibly good. They're like mini las cannons, and they're characters as well, which he hides in the brimstone mass, the horde, so you can't target them. They actually had a bit of a disadvantage against me, because if they moved, it was still a heavy weapon, so it's a -1 to hit. And then if they were firing at something like one of my Venoms or my flyers, it was another -1 to hit. So all of a sudden, you can see how this initial little -1 to hit from the Venom suddenly becomes a real problem, and he was having a lot of trouble actually taking out my vehicles. The only way that he could really effectively do it was with the Mortal Wound spam, the smites, right? So how did I get around that? Well, again, and this has been a running theme throughout the events, people say, oh, well, if you take the Venom spam, you've got nothing to screen with. And, how are you going to beat these, big smite spam armies and so forth? Well, I absolutely do have stuff to screen with. I've got my warriors, If you're facing that style army, there's nothing saying that I have to deploy in my Venoms. So what you can do against those armies, and this is exactly what I did against Chema, as you saw in the deployment, I kept everything really tight in my deployment zone, in a little vehicle Drukhari castle. The flotilla had just emerged from the webway, you can imagine, right? And then what you actually do is with your infantry, now I was deployed so far back in that first game, I didn't need to have my infantry out turn 1. I'd already pre-measured that, so I didn't have to have them out. But if they were going to be in range turn 1, I would have deployed the infantry out, right? But subsequently, from my turn 1 on, I actually did deploy my infantry out. And what you do is you have 3 squads, you have 5, and you sort of have them in overlapping ranks. So you go 1 rank here, 1 rank here, 1 rank here, right? And what happens is Smite can only target the nearest visible enemy, okay? So if his nearest visible enemy is a unit of 5 warriors, and the maximum he can kill if he overpowers with a herald, is D6. Generally speaking, they're killing 2, 3, 4 warriors. I actually get my 6 up, funnily enough, power from pain against that as well, which is pretty cool. But regardless, they generally can't kill the warriors with 1 smite. And so what ends up happening is it takes a couple of smites to get through 1 rank. It will then take a couple more smites to get through the 2nd rank, and it will take a couple more smites to get through the 3rd rank. Generally speaking, with the way that you can deploy and move as well, is they won't always have all 6 of those smites in range turn 1 anyway, right? So what will end up happening is they kill a couple of warrior units. That's absolutely fine. And then they've had to move towards you to, get towards your castle of the flotilla, And then what you can do is, because you're so fast with Dark Elders, you can just go hard to 1 flank. Leave the warriors there, and then again, move them out in front of you, spacing the models out. So again, they're just going to absorb these smites, and your opponent's got all of this power, all of the power, but it's going on your chaff, and I've still got 2 objective secured units tucked away inside Venoms, ready to pounce out on objectives at the end of the game. So that's just the tactic that I used against Chema, and subsequently in one of the other games as well, which you'll see very shortly. But it's an effective way of getting around that smite spam. Don't be afraid to put out a couple of chaff units and let them absorb the smite, and then use your maneuverability to go onto one of the hard flanks. That's why you saw me deploy very centrally there in that Dawn of War deployment. I knew I could then just go whoop, straight over, or straight over here wherever he was going, and give him some real problems, and then just mass the firepower into him. And because I've got that speed, I know I've got the speed to move out, end game, and still take objectives anyway. So ultimately that's what won me the game, and that was the tactic that I used. Now in theory, if I was rolling average, I think it would have actually been pretty horrific. Probably by turn 3 or 4 he would have had suffered so many casualties, I think, that I would have won all points. But because I rolled so poorly, it ended up becoming really interesting, which was really, really cool. So look, that was game 1. That was game 1. Hopefully you understand a little bit about the tactics I'm talking about there. Let's go on to game 2, and hopefully the understanding of how this Drukhari army worked will start to become clearer.
It's round 2. Round 2, we're in. The Dark Elder have deployed. Kill points and cleansing control. I've done some screening here with some warriors because we were against a Deep Strike Blood Angel army, big Redemptor Dreadnoughts, or sorry, Leviathan Dreadnought even, the proper Dreadnought, the Redemptor Dreadnought, 2 Razorbacks, Devastators, and he's got 2 loads of Death Company, a Librarian with a jump pack, very assaulty, very high damage output army, assuming you can get the Alpha Strike off. Obviously I've tried to minimise that. He did get first turn. Let's see what happens, folks. Round 2, wish me luck. Team, I'd like to say that was a great game. I mean, we had as much of a laugh as we could, didn't we?
I'll give you that. It was.
Yeah, it was. But it was horrendous, wasn't it? It was horrendous. No, I mean, look, there was nothing tactically wrong that James did. In fact, he did the right things when he deep struck. He nearly got a charge off on one of my flies, which was exposed. And he had Lamartis with the re-roll charge. He failed it even with the re-roll. It was a shocker. Could have downed a Razor Wing first turn. And unfortunately, his Leviathan whiffed hard. I'm talking 1s and 2s across the board. It was an absolute shocker. So he didn't even destroy the Venom or Razor Ravagers that he was firing out with his Melter from the Leviathan. And to be honest, guys, it was just downhill from there. I was rolling. It was a spider game. You know the games where I'm rolling 6s across the board. So all of the bad luck I had in the first game was just back here in trumps, and James was rolling 1s and 2s. By turn 3, I had tabled him. Nothing left. He'd only killed 2 Cabalite Warrior squads. So in all honesty, guys, that was just a bad matchup for him. My list is just much cheesier than his. No great play on my part. It was just a bad matchup for him. The maths got the better end of him because I had a better list. So, hopefully next game will be awesome. And wish me luck. So far we're doing well. We're back on track to take our title back. Let's see if we can do it.
So game 2 with my mate James Otero from Siege Studios. Ouch. Sorry, James, if you're watching this. Yeah, it was horrific. Turn 3, he literally had no models left on the board. I'd lost almost nothing. As you saw in the beginning of the game, because he had a deep strike heavy army, this is how, again, you combat those armies which are heavy on the assault and can come in and really alpha strike you. Again, you can absolutely scream with your warriors, which is what I did. So I castled all of the vehicles pretty tight, and then I put the warrior units out as far away from those vehicles. Right, so I put them right at the back of the deployment zone, and I put the warriors right at the front of the deployment zone, and I made this sort of circle, and spread everything out 2 inches, made this circle so that pretty much any deep strike he could do, bar 1, which was on the hard left flank where he could just get through to one of my flyers with a unit of Death Company. I pretty much nullified the charges that he could do with anything else. His awesome Leviathan Dreadnought, his one of his big units of Death Company, and it made it really, really tough for him, because the minute he knew that had happened and he came down, he was like, right, well, I'm going to have to hide, because one, if I make the charge, the maximum I'm going to kill is 5 warriors. Okay, which is a depressing thought. And then as they look up, having killed those 5 warriors, they're staring down the gun barrels of 6 Venoms, 3 Ravagers and 3 Razor Wings. You know, it's not a good look. And I'm a big Blood Angels fan. I didn't want to see it. He didn't want to see it. So, you know, you can imagine how that would have gone down, right? So, you know, in the end, he ended up deep striking 1 unit in one of the buildings, pretty much out of line of sight. So I couldn't shoot them except with one of the Razor Wings that could do like a flyby. And his other unit that came in with Lamatis, he was unlucky with. You know, they deserved to make that charge. I was actually willing it to happen to destroy that Razor Wing and earn in first strike. But unfortunately, this is a dice game. Sometimes, guys, the dice don't go your way. He failed both the charges despite the reroll with Lamatis. And then, of course, Razor Wing turned around. He had his Librarian over there, Lamatis. You can imagine how it went. It was pretty much a mop-up operation from turn 2. I'd already put Dark Light into his other Dreadnought and his Leviathan. I destroyed turn 1 with Dark Light as well. The combination of the blasters from the Archons as well inside the Venoms and everything just completely obliterated him. And so, you know, in the end, it wasn't really a great game. We had a great laugh, you know, but this was a classic example of the Dark Elder list being so much more cheesy than James's Blood Angels, which was actually a really nice, fluffy Blood Angel army, I thought. And the Dark Elder just mathematically had such an advantage that it wasn't too much he could do, especially after I'd screamed as well. So that was game 2, guys. That was game 2. Game 3, all of a sudden, because I've just taken a max win, I'm now facing a very, very strong army, and that's coming up next.
All right, folks, we're back into the arena here, and it's the arena of cheese with one of my good pals, Maxwell. Hello, Maxwell. Now, we've got the Dark Elder, of course, round 3. We're talking the Relic here, folks. That's where it is. I'm facing Ynnari. We can't really see them, but we did see them because we're Dark Elder and we're cheesy. We've got a super fast move, so I can get everything pretty much in line of sight if I want to. We've got 5 troops of Harlequins in 5 Star Weavers. Remember, these are Ynnari, folks. We've got the Incarni, the Avatar of the Dead in reserve. We have Ivrain, we have a Shadow Seer. Every single unit has 5 fusion pistols. Every single unit has the Caress of Death. So with Soul Burst, you know, I'm not going to teach you guys to suck eggs, but with Soul Burst, this army is extremely fast. It is extremely deadly. Max is on 2 wins. I'm on 2 wins. Our meeting was inevitable. Okay, so that's the mission, guys. It's Deadlock again with 6 Nostrian cards. And I've actually, Cheesy Lawrence, I've got 3 in my own deployment zone straight off the bat, so it's a good draw. But let's see what happens, guys. I should get the Alpha Strike. Let's see if it pays off. I'll get back to you at the end of the game. That's it. End of the game. Ravager alive. Ravager alive. Warriors alive. Warriors alive. Venom. Archons. The Spider, of course, survived. More Venoms over here. We've got the Relic. We had the Maelstrom. I've just backed away the cards. Max had a Star Weaver over here and a Harlequin troop here. So that was unfortunately max points, unfortunately for young Maxwell. But there was a small chance, the Ravager actually was positioned here. There's a small chance if he destroyed it, he could have Soul Burst, moved, potentially charged here, killed them. I would have done a heroic intervention, of course. So there was a chance, but ultimately that chance was stolen by the Lawrence Luck Vortex. You know all about that, don't you?
All I'm hearing is gloat, 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 gloat.
So that's 3 victories, and before I'm called something unsavory, I'm going to sign out. Bye-bye.
So, game 3, taken with max points against Maxwell himself, who is none other than actually the Warhammer Fest champion. So Maxwell, you know, I said he was a competent player in the Voxcast, but you know, Max is a very good player, guys. Make no mistake. So he won Warhammer Fest, the Warhammer Fest Grand Tournaments with a Ynnari list. And, you know, competently played his way through the 5 games there and, you know, ultimately won the event. So, you know, and he's consistently finishing very high. In fact, he was played in the finals of No Retreat 4 against Ace Face, and just lost out there. So, you know, he consistently places very well at events, and, you know, goes to a variety of events such as the Northwest Open and so forth, Last Chance Open, you know. So Max is a good player. You can't take that away from him. And then on top of that, he's running a Ynnari list, which in my opinion was very, very strong. It was very strong. So he, like me, had the right idea, I think, in terms of those Star Weavers. The -1 to hit with a 4-up invulnerable save actually makes them really rather resilient, you know, even against the Dark Light, because all of a sudden I'm hitting on 4s. I've still got to wound him on 3s, and then he's got a 4-up invulnerable save against it, guys. And it only takes him a turn to get within assault range. And in addition to that, don't forget, they've all got fusion pistols. Every single one of his squads was more than capable of dealing with pretty much any tank, you know, or any monster with those 5 fusion pistol hits that you can think of. So, you know, it's a very effective army, and the minute the soul burst started happening, you know, he would then, you know, do an additional charge or shoot again, and it became really, really powerful. Plus, great use of the Incarn, the Avatar of the Dead, who's very savvy with how he moved him. Always made him appear or reappear in the right situation to just make sure that I couldn't quite get enough firepower on him. And we had a bit of a dance of death going on, you know, for about 3 turns. Finally got him, if I remember correctly, in the 4th turn, which was cool. But ultimately, great player, great list. The thing that won it for me again was, one, going first. That helped. I think I needed first turn in that game. If he had gotten first turn, moved everything out into my lines, you know, moved the Star Weavers out, advanced into me, could have become a real problem. I would have still screened with my warriors, but I would have had to have sacrificed a lot more warriors to do so. And then I don't think I would have had enough end game to secure that relic. Plus, with he had moved across the boards, what would have happened is I wouldn't have been able to actually secure the relic early on like I did in this game. So when I had first turn, I sent a unit of troops out, sent the Venom out to get as near to the relic as possible, and then with my Razor Wings and my Ravagers, I did manage to down, I think, 2 Star Weavers on the first turn. Just grounding 2 of those units was enough. I was also managed to snipe Ivrain. I didn't kill her, but I severely wounded her, and it made her a little bit more cautious about coming out. But in the end, it was a combination of screening. Again, I put some warrior units in front of him to help speed bump, and in the end, I managed to protect my relic with the warriors that were slowly moving away from him. I actually put a Ravager out in front of them as well, so you'd have to deal with that. And if he had managed to destroy that Ravager, he only had like a 4-man unit left, I think. If he'd managed to destroy the Ravager, he would have, and he whiffed on those guns as well, guys. So he did deserve to probably destroy the Ravager. Granted, I had the 5-up invulnerable saves, but he did whiff the dice. I think he just missed with all of them and then failed to wound. But granted, if he destroyed that, he would have soul burst. Could potentially have gotten the charge in against those warriors that were holding the relic, and then all of a sudden it could have been quite interesting. I had my Archons there screening as well, so I was playing a heroic intervention, and I would have been able to strike them back, potentially kill them, and then still hold the relic anyway. But it never played out that way, so we'd never know. But very early on, because I got the Alpha Strike, and then I moved out onto all of these Maelstrom objectives as well, and I spread my army out very deliberately early on, because ultimately, if you stay all clumped together against what I call a murder-based list. So on-demand Tactica fans will know what that is. It's basically an assault-based army. If you stay all clumped together against them, you're basically asking to be killed, because all of his assault elements will just, you know, completely swamp you in one place. But if you spread them out, you know, assault armies don't like being spread out generally. They like being together and working with each other to deal with everything. So you spread out. And that, of course, then really thinned his resources, and Harlequins are quite expensive, so all of a sudden I was, and of course, spreading the enemy units out to spread them away from their soul burst, right? You know, you don't want them soul bursting off of each other when you start shooting them. So a combination of those tactics ultimately stole it for me. It was a fantastic game. It was well fought. You know, Max, if you're watching this, what a boss. Always a pleasure playing you. Played him at the Northwest Open as well, and of course we had a little catch up at Warhammer Fest when I was there as well. But Max unfortunately did lose that one, and that ended day 1 for me on 2 max point victories and 1 solid victory, 18 points to 6. So I don't think it'd be a crushing victory. I think we'd call it a minor victory is what it would end up being. So 2 max victories, 1 minor victory. You know, and I thought, look, this is good. I'm on track. But there was one army that I knew I would more than likely have to face if I was to take my title back. And let's see if that happened. It's game 4 coming up next.
Folks, we're done. Now, sorry, I didn't get the pre-game because we were in a bit of a rush setting up, but I was facing Tau, a very interesting list. Lewis, in fact, has been smashing at this event with a list which, you know, on paper shouldn't be doing well, but is. And when I played him, I could tell why, because he knows what he's doing. There's some great synergy there. Tau Commander, of course, drones, you know, that sort of jazz, but in the end, it's turn 3. He did get first turn. He got a mini alpha strike off, destroying a Ravager and so forth, but ultimately the Dark Elder took the day. 4 points, brutal stuff. That means I am certainly playing in the final. 100% guaranteed to be playing in the final and potentially retaking my title.
So, first game of the next day, and as you've just seen, I did manage to take max points, but Lewis, what a player. So he went through on 3, you know, victories to get through to that 4th game with the Tau list, as I've said in the video, which shouldn't on paper have been that good. You know, the Storm Surge, he had a Tau Commander, he had some drones, of course, as you would, to protect the Commander, lots of Pathfinders, which is really nice, Ghost Keel, he had Long Strike, which is awesome, and another Hammerhead as well for additional buffs there. You know, on paper, it was a solid Tau army, but it, you know, it wasn't your Tau Commander spam army, right? It wasn't that. But Lewis was a very good player. You know, there was a reason why he had won his first 3 games as he had done, and he absolutely deserved to be in that 4th game with his list, because he played like a boss. And this is one, I think, for me, and I really respected Lewis for it. I think he was one of those players that knows his army so well, you know, and has probably played Tau for a long, long time. Now, my understanding was he had painted this Tau army up, especially for the tournament. But my understanding was that he had been playing Tau for a long time. And if he hadn't, if I'm wrong with that, wow, I'm really, really impressed, because he knew the army, knew how to squeeze the efficiency, great target priority, great manoeuvring as well on his part. And to be fair, Lewis, he got really unlucky at some pretty key moments. Like when his Tau Commander came in with all of the fusion, he whiffed so badly. Didn't destroy the Ravager he was targeting, just misses, and despite missing when hitting on 2s as well, he was missing and or failing to wound. And then I think the one that did get through, of course, what did Lawrence do? Rolled a 6, didn't he, and saved it. So you know, sorry Lewis, he'll get me next time, I'm sure. But look, really, really good game. Despite getting max points, I think, you know, the first couple of turns, it was still quite cat and mouse, and it was quite interesting. And it could, you know, could have gotten the steal off, because I didn't quite get both the Hammerheads in turn 1. I was sort of severely damaged one, and put maybe a wound or 2 on Long Strike. But you know, he actually still had the ability to return fire, and he had his Fusion Commander come in and stuff. So it was quite interesting first couple of turns. But then by turn 3, it started getting, you know, the Dark Elder started powering up, and I started rolling really hot, and then stuff started dying left, right, and centre. So look, really fun game, an interesting one. Good to see another player who knows what he's doing with his army, and it was pretty awesome. So that meant, with at this point 3 maximum wins, 1 minor win, that there was only 1 game left to play, the finals. And it was the army which I sort of knew at some point, if I did well, I would have to face it, because it was almost impossible for this man who was using the army to not do well. And that's coming up next.
We're in the finals. The Drukhari are deployed. And we're facing the list which I think ultimately my list, based on its power, it was inevitable that I came across this Aetios and Horus Band with lots of heralds. This is the worthy final, I think, for No Retreat 5. I win this, I win my title, I win the tournament. And it is very possible, but of course these are 2 very competitive armies, really. You know, would do well in most competitive arenas. And obviously Atios, if you don't know what he does, is an absolute monster. Absolute monster. Incidentally banned in the ITC for good reason, but they didn't have any restrictions in this event, so he is there. So I have to deal with him. The Drukhari are an unusual army in the fact that they can deal with him. I'll get back to you at the end of the game. Hopefully have the title in hand. Team, an exceptionally hard-fought game. Exceptionally hard-fought. Let me break this down for you. This unit of horrors is holding this objective because they've got more. This is the primary. And this is the same unit of horrors, which is contesting the other primary from my venom. Everything in between is dead. All of the horrors in between are dead. So the tactic was, I was going to try and force them out of coherency and then force the units to move back into coherency, meaning that all of a sudden he's not holding any of the primaries. I win the primary. I've already won the Maelstrom. Took lead on the Maelstrom early. Got the big bird in turn 4 in the end. And I also got the tertiary as well, which is the Slayer Warlord's first strike. So I won that as well. So it's actually, as the game ends, dead draw of 14 points each. The final 2 players could not be decided who edged the other.
That's fair.
Which is pretty cool, I thought. So ultimately, I thought the tactic was good. I put all of the firepower into these horrors and I caused basically 20 wounds after his morale check. Forced the huge gap here. So this, remember, this unit here is the same as this unit here. And everything here is dead. So I forced the gap and I was like, great, so now he's got to move back together, right? But no, according to the FAQ, if you cannot physically make coherency, you actually just don't move. And I didn't know that. So there you go, that's how the game ends. He contests 1, he holds 1. So he gets primary, I get Maelstrom, secondary, and I get tertiary. It's a dead draw. Because Chris has won all 4 of his first games with maximum points, which you would expect, of course, with this list. That does mean he takes it. I suppose, because I still took a lot of points, I probably will finish second. Maybe I'll finish third. I don't know. Depends how other people have done. Anyway, guys, another epic tournament, and I'll talk a little bit more about this game in detail in the Voxcast and how I managed to survive such a brutal army relatively well. Of course, the Spider's alive, Warlord's alive over here. Still got some units alive. But yeah, we'll talk about that in the Voxcast, guys. So anyway, until next time, looks like we have a new No Retreat champion.
So can you believe it? What an awesome final. 14 points apiece. A dead draw at the end there. And ultimately, I think I spent extra time on describing the tactics in that game. But just to reiterate, like I did against Chema, what I did in the first turn is I actually had 4 units of warriors out. And I created 4 different layers for his smite to get through, which actually afforded me in the end about 3 turns worth of shooting. And then I started to do some flanking as well, of course, over the first 3 turns, just to ensure that 1, he wasn't going to be in smite range with everything anyway, and 2, it just enabled me to just keep peppering him, harassing him with this firepower, you know, from either flank. And, you know, ultimately, I ran away with the Maelstrom quite early, and I did get the tertiary as well, you know, so I spent a lot of firepower on turn 1, destroying one unit of 10 brimstones. I think just because that was the points thing. So I was actually able to pluck them off and just secure that easy first blood, or first strike rather, which is very, very critical, especially in this sort of tournament format. You want to ensure that you can get, you know, any points that you can. Anything that you can control in the tournaments, you absolutely want to do. You know, you shouldn't just go, oh, don't worry about those points, I don't need them. You should always play for as many points as you can get. But ultimately, why did we draw? Well, there were a couple of things that happened throughout the game, which I think if it had changed, you know, if the luck was slightly different, he could have started dominating really early, or I could have started dominating really early, because the Drukhari were an odd opponent for him, because my poison against that big bird, Atios Valkyries, the Slayer of Souls, which I'm going to actually go over the rules for you guys, because he may not be a model that you're actually all that familiar with. So I'll tell you a little bit about what he does in a moment. But against him, he's not a vehicle. So my poison could actually affect him. And ultimately, when I killed him in turn 4, and I think it was only the second time he died throughout the entire event, when I killed him in turn 4, it was the poison that did it. In fact, only one Dark Lance, as I recall, got through. I think 1 or 2 blasters got through, but only one Dark Lance got through his 3+ invulnerable save the entire time. Now, statistically, that was a little unusual, because that's even with his command point reroll. Statistically, I should have had 1.5 go through a turn. It just didn't happen, guys. I was rolling really quite poorly, and what he had, of course, which is the correct life choice, which I don't think I mentioned in the Chema game from turn 1, from game 1 either, is that they have the Changeling there, guys. And for those of you which aren't familiar with the Changeling, he's like a Tzeentch Herald, and he gives everything within 9 inches a -1 to hit. So, you know, he was using my tactics against me, which is great. You know, so all of a sudden those Dark Lances are hitting on 4s, just like against Chema. You know, the poison is hitting on 4s. So that's how he sort of managed to keep Fate Weaver alive a little longer, because it was harder to hit him, right, with the Changeling. So Chris is an absolutely awesome player. I've played Chris before, once at I think it was the Last Chance Open, and again, he consistently, at any event I've seen him play at, he consistently finishes in the top 5. You know, he's pretty much only a Tzeentch Demon player. It's his favourite faction, and he knows the army really well, which of course, you know, when you've got a very capable player using an extremely powerful army, it becomes really, really tough. You know, it was a tough matchup. But the Drukhari, I knew could do it. And so Chris said it as well. So we played each other before, because I actually beat him at the LCO. So we both sort of knew how each other played, and we both knew either of us could potentially take the game, depending on what the dice said. And so what I did is I used my screening tactics, which I used against Chema. It did actually afford me 3 additional turns of shooting, which is really good. So the tactic paid off. And then right at the end there, after I managed to kill the big birds, I think if I'd killed him a turn earlier, which by my calculations was going to happen just on the averages, if I had killed him a turn earlier, then I think I would have actually taken the game. So the game ended on turn 4. Okay, so I'd already got the Maelstrom leads, I'd already got the tertiary, that was a given. He wasn't really able to get back into that side of the game, so it was all about the primary at this point. Now, because I killed him on turn 4, that meant that the rest, and I killed him early, it's like the first couple of shots of turn 4, it meant that the rest of my force could then shoot at his large mob, because he had a 30 brimstone, 30 horrors, which then turned into, you know, blue horrors, and then turned into brimstone horrors, etc., etc. So basically, the bulk of his troops were all in that one big blob, and it was that large conga line that he had from his primary objective in his deployment zone to my primary objective in my deployment zone. And so what I needed was 1 additional turn to actually finish them off, because at this point I still had the Razor Wings, I still had a Ravager, I still had a few Venoms. You know, I was actually more than had the firepower at this point to actually wipe out his troops and take the primary objective. And to be fair, actually at this point only needed to draw the primary with him, because then I would have won the tournament, because I would have taken a draw on the primary and I would have won the Maelstrom and the tertiary, and it would have just snuck my points up above him despite him having the 4 max wins. But ultimately I got this guy, Aetios, a turn too late, and we got timed. I think if it had gone on to turn 5, Chris and I said, you know what? You probably would take it, because then I would have had another turn of shooting. I would have wiped his troops out, you know, which is fine. But this man is the beast, the big birds that did it. So he's power level 35. Just to give you some, because some of you must be thinking, how can you kill him? It can't be that tough. He's one of the toughest creatures that Forge World do, actually, and he's very, very reasonably pointed for what he does. So he's power level 35. Strength 8, toughness 8, 27 wounds. He's got a 3+ invulnerable save. That's the key thing, because he's a demon lord, and he's got ephemeral form, which gives him adds 1 to his invulnerable save as a Tzeentch demon. So, in addition to him being extremely tough, he then has the Staff of Cataclysm, which is assault 2d6, strength 9, -4, damage 3, and the range is 60 inches. So basically, whatever he looks at, is going to get destroyed by this thing. He hits on 2s in both combat and with his ballistic skill. And the real tough part is that no matter how much you degrade him, his weapon skill and ballistic skill don't degrade. They stay the same. It's only his move and his attacks characteristic that goes down. In addition to that, he has a +2 psychic test, +2 bonus on his psychic tests. He's got an awesome smite. I think he's got double range smite, if I remember correctly. But regardless, anyway, it gives you an idea of what he has. So, you know, this guy ultimately acted as like the spearhead, if you like, for his force, and he had his big blob of horrors, which he absolutely used correctly to sort of conga line and sort of spread himself out across as many objectives as he can. And early games that other opponents couldn't physically move into contact with those objectives, etc. And then, of course, he's got all of his heralds. I think he had 5 heralds, if I remember correctly. If Chris watches this, he'll correct me, I'm sure. There's something like 5 heralds, of course, the changeling, and he had a prince as well. So lots of smite outputs, lots of good damage. And ultimately, you know, it was a fantastic game. You know, it was absolutely a finals worthy of the event, I thought. And it was a real pleasure to play it. So in the end, 14 points apiece. We got Big Bird on turn 4. I think 1 turn too late, and then I massed that firepower into the large hordes, and ultimately I wasn't aware of the FAQ, because when he had to literally pick up all of those models that were dead, and I was like, great, so that's the plan. Now you have to, in your next turn, move. We didn't play his final turn because I went first. We didn't play his final turn because we could see that he could just stand there. There was no point playing it, and we didn't have time to do another one. He could just stay there, and he could contest with one little part of the unit on one side of the board and hold with the other. And that ultimately got him the game. So I shook his hand. I said, look, well done. Congratulations. It was a well-fought draw, and well done for winning the tournament. So Chris, if you're watching this, well done, buddy. I'll see you at Heat 1. He's going to be at Heat 1 as well with myself. And in the end, I ended up guessing just underneath Chris. I got runner-up, which is awesome. So, you know, because I still took a lot of points from that, because it was 14 points apiece, it was a dead draw, I didn't lose the game, we got second place. So now, I've added that to my first 3 no retreats, which was absolutely awesome. And what an outing for the Drukhari it was. You know, it was a great tournament, some great players. You know, as I've said before, the atmosphere was absolutely incredible, and I was really, really pleased to have achieved that with the Drukhari, especially considering that we didn't have our codex yet. I think it's in fact a testament to just how good the Drukhari have become in 8th edition. So I'd be very, very curious, of course, to see what might happen to them, and for Zinch Demons as well, who again are still an index book when their codexes drop. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this little Voxcast. It was a roundup, me doing a lot of rambling about the tactics, and no doubt there will be questions about it. Oh, Lawrence, I don't know why you did this, etc. You know, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll try and get back to you, but hopefully it gave you guys an understanding of how this particular Drukhari list worked. You know, it's not the most powerful Drukhari list that you can come up with, but it's very balanced and it is very strong. It's definitely capable of going toe-to-toe with, well, you know, things like Big Bird, which, well, to be fair, in most tournaments you wouldn't face Big Bird anyway, because he's overpower level 32. But, you know, if you can go toe-to-toe with something like that, which will be legal at Heat 1, you know, so I have to prepare myself and maybe facing a Big Bird, because not every tournament has a power level limit, then you know that your army's pretty good, and so the Drukhari could do that. So it was a good force. So guys, hope that all makes sense. Hope you've enjoyed this Voxcast. I'll have plenty more coming to you very soon. In fact, as of next week, the first Dungeons and Dragons episode would have dropped right here on Freeview, and fingers crossed, episode 1 of the brand new narrative campaign. So lots to look forward to, folks. Till next time, this has been Lawrence. I'll see you soon.